Okay, this is our discussion for Boots by Rudyard Kipling. Okay. So in this poem, there's like a lot of repetition between, the words that he's obviously saying. And so I think that serves to just emphasize the repetition of their daily routine. It's a symbolic thing.
And then I think the sort of, well, at least in the really famous audio of the recitation of the poem, he sort of goes slowly, so it sort of matches the rhythm of marching to it, like we're slog, 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 slogging over Africa. So that sort of like there's a rhythm to it and that matches.
Yeah, can I just say, it's like the repetition, it's just like the repetition of marching. It's left, right, left, right. It's just repeating that over and over and over again.
And then as soon as in the poem where you change tones and he's like, oh my God, keep me from going lunatic. His like, I guess his curiosity when he's speaking, it gets to a point. And I think throughout the entire poem, it's literally just the soldiers trying to get by. And then in the last few stanzas, it's the soldier just like, going insane and trying to keep that insanity in check.
Yeah. But you could also be like, you could think of it as the way that like each of the different stanzas are written. You could think of it as like kind of a diary where it's always a different day. And it's always marked by, there's no discharge in the war. And there's no discharge in the war. It's always just like, where's the end? Where's the end? I want this to be over, but it keeps on happening. It keeps on going. And like again, in the recitation, as it just goes on more and more, it just picks up in pace. And it goes like foot, slog, slog. Slog, it's slow to say. It's hard, it's weird.
Slog.
Yeah.
It's not like a click, like a fast, sharp.
And then at the end, it's like, paint so bad by day. Those are like really easy to say, right? Like 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. You have to say each word, it takes a while, but then at the end, it just becomes sentences where it's just like, this is happening, this is really going, it's getting faster and faster and worse and worse.
I feel like even though like the slog, 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 slog is really slow, and then like, it's so repetitive that they're like slowly going insane. But then they also at the same time they have to be like alert because this is a war. Like if you look at that line, count the bullets and the bandoliers, and if your eye drops will get on top of you, like they're gonna get shot if they just lose focus by watching the boots go up and down.
Yeah.
No, exactly, because
and I think in this case, it's not so that the sounds are like assonance where like it's suz and fuzz that sound nice, but in this case I think it's used in the opposite way where they're used to like slow down and sort of drag the tempo down. So like slog, like the slut sound, like it takes time to sound that out, and then like 7, 6, so like so like that just sort of like slows everything down, sort of turns into like a lush, but while at the same time keeping a tempo. So so it's sort of like I guess that reflects how like in the soldiers, the mental state of the soldiers, sort of like everything's slow, everything's repetitive, so everything's sort of like mushed up, everything's foggy, but then at the same time there's still a rhythm where you have to keep going every single day for it to war. Exactly.
But I just want to like add on to Darren, it's like if your eyes drop, they will get a top of you. In the historical context, this is a Second Boer War. That war turned into like guerrilla warfare, so it's like it's a major superpower with like all the rules and restrictions in the armies, where it's like you have to march. It's conventional warfare against guerrilla warfare. It's like it's something that they're not prepared for, and this it's like being repeated throughout history. If it's like a superpower against guerrilla warfare, it usually doesn't go well for the superpower. Like look, Vietnam, the Afghan War.
Like I think related to that, do we think that this poem is anti-war, pro-war? Because we know that Rudyard Kipling wrote The White Man's Burden. So then that would mean that he himself had beliefs of imperialism and being pro-war, but then this sort of portrays
there's
the
definitely
brutality of war.
also a couple of like
That's contradicting, I think.
there's what?
Like him writing about the brutality of war
But
while glorifying war in his other poems.
yeah, but there's also definitely a couple of like racist elements in here, which I think serves to just like glorify their their whole existence in Africa at that given point in time. He says like we can stick out hunger, thirst, and weariness, but not the chronic sight of meat. Like that's referring to, I think.
It's referring to the Boers.
It's referring to
But-
people they're trying to call.
I would say that's,
Can I
yeah.
just interject? The Boers, these are like the Dutch settlers from like the 1600s, so they've been there for a while. But it's like they're still white people.
But
because-
it's like nationalism. stuff.
Yeah, it's like the Boer nationalism for like the country that they had to colonize versus like Britain. It's like, no, we colonized this country. And I just want to point out, it's like throughout this entire poem, it's just the soldier's perspective, and it mentions like the Boers, but it's like, just to point out, there's no mention of like the actual like inhabitants of South Africa who have been there for like thousands of years and stuff. There's no mention of them at all. Because that's like what Rudyard Kipling was used to. It's all about the white people. That's why he wrote The White Man's Burden and stuff.
But then ultimately, I don't really feel this sort of pro-war aspect of this poem, because like, I guess you could say that we can stick out hunger, thirst, and weariness. That could be like
That could
showing the strength of a soldier. But then everything else is like, we're foot, slogging over Africa. So then that's like, I wouldn't say that would be a positive portrayal of the Boer War. And this would be in a, I guess, pre-World War I era where people didn't really know what war was like, because it was just so small scale. It wasn't like World War I. Well, we know that like people during the conscription of World War I, they were like, oh, we're gonna go to war, we're gonna be back by Christmas, and it's gonna be so fun. But then this sort of doesn't reflect that
This
attitude
is-
to war.
This is like
yeah.
directly after like World War II. This is like
Wait, was it?
not
First
directly.
1902. This is
Not
Yeah,
directly.
1902.
before.
Yeah, before.
This is before.
Yeah, this is 1900s.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
is this
I
the
think-
imperialism?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, this
okay.
is imperialism.
I think the line, like, there's no discharge in the war. I just feel like that, it's like, it means, what he's trying to say is like, there's no end to like colonialism. Like, we're slogging over Africa. Like, I feel
Well,
like.
I guess this could also be like, I guess it could be like, instead of portraying the glory of war, it could be like, war is terrible and therefore we need to like win to make sure that we don't suffer this anymore. I guess that could be,
And finish it as fast
Yeah.
as possible.
exactly, that could be like, we should do this, we should finish this, and therefore we should support the war because look at these soldiers suffering. I guess that could be an interpretation as
That
well,
would be
yeah.
Yeah, he also lost his son in World War I, which is after this, but he like continued supporting British imperialism like for the rest of his life. So I definitely don't think, although this could be interpreted as anti-war, but this was definitely written with like the intention of being pro-war.
I just want to also talk about this poem. It's got like a sound to it, like you can hear it in like all the recitations and everything, like all like the say
Yeah.
Caesaros. I don't know.
Caesar.
Yeah, yeah, but like all the pauses, it's like boots, 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 boots. It's moving up and down again, and it's 6/4 would be like the music notation, and I want to point out that that's like not regular. That's not normal. It's weird.
And I guess the latter parts of each line, like we're foot slogging over Africa, that's like a quicker, so that could be also be like you're marching, but then
Yeah.
suddenly you're like, you have to speed up, you have to like
Yeah.
fight, you have to go.
It's like that's guerrilla warfare for you.
Yeah.
You don't know when they're gonna be like struck with it. It could happen at any point. So it breaks up the rhythm of marching. It
Yeah.
breaks up all that.
I want to look at the part where he says, I marched 6 weeks in hell and I certify that hell, like hell isn't fire, devils, dark, anything, but boots, 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 boots. So like he's kind of saying the psychological,
Yeah.
the psychological part of the war is worse than like the attacks, the pain and everything.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd say like this poem, if it could be like any theme that I could really point out, it's like it's PTSD really.
Yeah.
Because you can see.
There's like a haunting tone to it when like
Yeah.
they say it.
And that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, it's about war. It's about the horrors of war while supporting war at the same time, which is confusing, but it makes sense because you're showing people that war is bad. Well, war isn't bad in itself, but fighting other people is a terrifying process, and we should sort of get that over quickly, I guess.
I don't know if Kipling like really supported war or if it was just
I
imperialism.
mean, imperialism is
It's-
technically just
I guess sort of
warfare.
like-
they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah,
The ends justify the means. So,
yeah,
It's also interesting that when he's counting out loud, the numbers, they don't go in order. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it just emphasized they were just trying to get through it. Like, they lost like, they weren't thinking, they just wanted to get it over with.
yeah, and it's like, it's always different because there's the repetition, but then there's also like, it's not just the 7, 7, 7, 7, it's 7, 6, 11, 5. It's always different, but it's always trying to be the same. I think that's good enough for